The last cruise ship on Earth with passengers on board has finally came home. We have all the details, so stay tuned. Ahoy there cruisers, we're Cruise with Ben and David, and I'm Ben. So the MSC Magnifica left Europe back on January the 5th from Genoa in Italy. It was heading on an epic 117-day cruise all around the world. How amazing does this sound? It was visiting 23 different countries. Just imagine how many places you could tick off your bucket list. It had just over 1,700 passengers, mostly from Italy, France and Germany, as well as a few others. At the time when it left in early January, the virus was just known as unknown pneumonia, so it really wasn't a big thing. There were only under 60 cases in the whole wide world, with all of those being in Wuhan, China. So at that point, it really wasn't a concern. So the ship left Genoa on time and headed to Spain and then across the Atlantic and did all of South America. It must have been absolutely amazing. After South America, it made its way to the Pacific. The virus really didn't impact the cruise until it arrived into the Pacific Ocean and the Cook Islands. This is when things started getting a little bit dodgy. They were beginning to ban all cruise ships, and this caused the itinerary to be changed for the first time. They did manage to stop somewhere else, but after that they finally headed to New Zealand, and things at the time was still going okay. The ship was on the other side of the world from its home port when the ports were starting to be closed, so it wasn't a really good situation for the Magnifica. So after leaving Wellington, it headed to Tasmania, which is a small island south of Australia, when things started to really go downhill. The island itself had 6 cases and things were getting worse. They were given permission to dock and for the passengers to leave the ship, but the captain very rightly decided to keep the people on board to stop them from getting off and bringing the virus on board. This was a very wise move from the captain, and we think it was the best move he could have made. It then headed to Australia and stopped in Sydney and Melbourne. This is where the cruise was cancelled. Everybody on board was going to be given a full refund. Passengers could get off, but if they got off, they had to fly home. They couldn't get back on the ship, or they could choose to stay on the cruise and take the epic up to 6-week journey home and covering 12,000 miles. As you can imagine, guys, only a few hundred left the ship. I think we would have done the same, with the majority of passengers staying on the ship for that huge journey. So as I said, it was going to be a 5-week journey with no stops. This is when the voyage hit a political nightmare storm. So then they headed for a place called Fremantle in Australia, where they were going to refuel and get all of the supplies they needed on the ship. To do this, they had to report exactly what medical things were going on the ship. At this point, 250 people had visited the medical centre throughout the cruise for absolutely nothing serious. So it was for things like painkillers, seasickness medication, band-aids, nobody with flu or COVID-19 symptoms at all. But suddenly on the news, Australian Premier Mark McGowan announced that over 250 people on board the Magnifica had reported respiratory illnesses. Oh my gosh, this was totally wrong. All the passengers on board were super healthy. As you can imagine, MSC insisted that there were no respiratory diseases on board or any type of flu symptoms. They were then accused of inconsistent advice. How crazy is this, guys? The fake news was spreading. It was completely false information. Finally, they were given permission to dock in Fremantle to fuel and reload the ship under strict conditions that nobody got off. There were border police checking this, so making sure that nobody got on or off the ship, as well as a handful of protesters protesting the fact that they came to the port and reloaded. Such a bad situation, guys. It really wasn't nice. Obviously, the Captain Liotta, he's from Sicily in Italy, said that this was totally fake news and he was super disappointed. Captain Liotta has worked on cruises for over 32 years. So as you can imagine, he's got a massive wealth of experience. He absolutely knows what he's doing. It's really ingrained in his blood. And he's one of the great captains from MSC. We've had so many cruises with them, guys, and the captains are always fantastic. So after it was resupplied, it headed back on its way east. It was going to stop in Dubai. This was changed because of some complications, so they decided to go to Sri Lanka and dock in Colombo instead. This is when another news storm happened. There was one crew member on board the ship. He was a chef called Anura Herath, and he wanted to get off in Colombo because he lived there. He was the only crew member on board from Sri Lanka. MSC agreed with this, but the problem was his government would not let him get off, and he wouldn't be able to get home from Europe otherwise. Basically, he spoke to a friend who was a journalist and made many pleas and posts online, and his message finally went viral. This caused the government to have a change of mind, and he was allowed to finally get off the ship and then be quarantined for a few weeks in his home country. He wasn't the only person to get off. He got off with a sick German woman. She was aged 75, completely non-COVID related, but unfortunately she later died in port, which is super sad, guys. It really brings a sour note. However, the mood and spirit on board the ship was really great. There was a party-like atmosphere with parties going around, theatre performances, gyms were open, activities as well as nice weather. Lots of pool areas so they could go out and swim and enjoy the pools, along with really nice food and drink. You've got to think it was probably the only theatre open in the whole world doing performances. So it was a complete stark contrast to the rest of the world. There really wasn't any chance of catching COVID-19 on the ship because nobody had been exposed to it. So it was a tiny little bubble in a haven at sea. So while the rest of the world were locked down with social distancing, the crew and the passengers on board were becoming a family, which was completely opposite to what was going on land. So you can imagine the spirit on board, guys. What would you like to do? Would have you got off the ship in Sydney or Melbourne and did that whole massive journey home on flights? Or would have you stayed on board the ship? I think we definitely would have stayed on board the ship just because it was probably one of the safest places on earth. You had good food, good drink, and it was the only place in the world where you could leave your room and mix with other people, go to parties, performances, sing-alongs, dances, activities, go to restaurants. It must have been a really nice, safe place to be. Lots of the passengers are saying that they had a great time still on board and they were treated very well by MSC. So big thumbs up to MSC there. So the journey finally came to an end. This Monday, the 20th of April, the passengers were finally able to disembark in Marseille, France. You've got to think the last time they touched land, so the last time they got off the ship was in Wellington, New Zealand, guys. This is on the complete opposite side of the world, almost 13,000 miles away. How crazy is that? So they've done this epic journey all around the world without getting off the ship. It must have been quite the experience. So let us know what you would have done in the comment section below. As always, guys, we absolutely love to hear from you and we really appreciate your comments. And you can further support us by subscribing. Please consider subscribing to our channel, guys, and hitting that bell button as well so you're notified every time we upload a brand new video like this one. Thank you so much. And again, thank you to all of our patrons. They're getting extra videos, behind the scenes footage, early access, as well as a podcast and loads of extra posts. And in return, guys, you are really supporting us. We super appreciate it. Our captain of the week is Melanie. So ahoy, Melanie. Thank you so much. Details of becoming a patron are in the comment section, in the description section below. Obviously, all of our content will always be free, but you guys are really keeping us going during this hard time. So that's it till next time. Happy cruising. Fingers crossed sooner than later. See ya.